Rain fell over the northern ridge in silver sheets, turning the abandoned road into a black ribbon of mud and shattered stone. No vehicles had crossed that road in 20 years, not since the mining colony closed and the orbital freight lanes shifted east. Yet something moved through the storm with the stubborn rhythm of a dying machine. The girl stumbled between the skeletal remains of old cargo pylons, one hand pressed against her stomach and the other clutching the torn edge of a gray travel cloak. She looked human from a distance. Up close, no one could have mistaken her for one. Her ears were long and finely pointed, extending through wet strands of pale hair, and faint lines of blue light pulsed beneath the skin of her neck whenever she forced herself to breathe. Those lines had once glowed brightly, symbols of health among her people. Now they flickered like a power grid on the verge of collapse. She had not eaten in 6 days. The emergency ration gel from the escape capsule had run out before she crossed the mountains, and the last thing she had swallowed was a mouthful of melted snow that tasted faintly of iron and industrial dust. Somewhere behind the clouds, a search vessel swept the valley with invisible beams. She felt the pulse of the scan pass through her bones. For one terrifying moment, she froze. Then the signal moved on. Either the storm had hidden her, or the hunters had decided a starving refugee was not worth the fuel. She almost laughed at that, but laughter required energy, and she had already spent most of hers remaining upright. A weak yellow light appeared ahead. At first, she thought it was another hallucination. She had seen 3 imaginary cities, 1 floating palace, and a bowl of soup that had insulted her personally. The soup had been especially convincing. This light, however, remained steady. It came from a small house, standing alone beyond a line of wind-bent trees, its roof patched with metal panels, and its chimney releasing a thin spiral of smoke. A mechanical sign beside the gate blinked through the rain. Hollis Repair and Agricultural Systems. Beneath it, someone had painted, in smaller letters, "If it explodes, it costs extra." The girl reached the gate and placed a hand on it. The metal was warm. A security sensor rotated toward her with a tired, electronic whine. "State your business," it said. She opened her mouth, but no words came. "Acceptable businesses include repairs, deliveries, debt collection, and apologies," the censor continued. "Unacceptable businesses include murder, religious conversion, and extended warranties." The girl stared at it. "Food," she whispered. The censor paused. "That is not on the list." Her knees gave way. She collapsed beside the gate, her cheeks striking the wet ground as the blue lines beneath her skin dimmed almost completely. Inside the house, Elias Venn was attempting to convince an elderly cooking unit that smoke was not a seasoning. "You asked for roasted vegetables," the machine complained from the kitchen counter. "I provided heat. You provided a small domestic fire. A difference of scale, not method." Elias opened a window, waved away the smoke, and heard the exterior alarm chirp once. Not the shrill tone for predators or trespassers, but the hesitant little chime the system used when it encountered something it could not classify. He pulled on his coat and stepped into the rain. At first he saw only the muddy road and the gate. Then the sensor tilted downward. "Unlisted visitor," it announced. Elias found the girl lying motionless in the mud. Her strange ears were the first thing he noticed. Then the cloak scorched along one shoulder. Then the hollow sharpness of her face. He knelt and pressed 2 fingers against her neck. Her pulse was weak, but present. "Call the clinic," he said. "Clinic unavailable," replied the gate sensor. "Storm interference." "Then call anyone." "Would you like me to contact debt collection?" "No." "Religious conversion?" "Definitely no." Elias lifted the girl carefully. She weighed almost nothing. As he carried her toward the house, the cooking unit rolled to the doorway on squeaking wheels. "You have brought home another damaged object," it observed. She is not an object. Previous examples include a weather drone, 2 mining robots, and a goat. The goat followed me. The goat attempted to eat me. Elias laid the girl on the narrow bed beside the stove and covered her with blankets. He examined the glowing lines beneath her skin, unsure whether they were natural or medical implants. A cracked silver device hung from her wrist, displaying symbols he could not read. One symbol flashed repeatedly in red. He did not need translation software to understand that red flashing symbols were rarely invitations to dance. "Heat water," he ordered, "and start soup." The cooking unit's lens narrowed. "My last soup was criticized. Your last soup dissolved a spoon. The spoon was structurally weak." Elias opened the storage cabinet and took out bread, dried vegetables, preserved fruit, and the last sealed container of real mountain honey. He had been saving it for winter, but looking at the unconscious girl, he decided winter could complain later. Outside, far above the storm, a silent black drone turned in the clouds and locked onto the faint biological signal rising from the house. Its lens brightened. A transmission leapt toward the stars. Inside, unaware that anyone had found them, Elias placed a pot over the stove and began preparing the largest meal his small kitchen had seen in years. The first thing the girl noticed was warmth. It surrounded her so completely that for several confused seconds she believed she had died and awakened inside one of the sun temples from her childhood. Then something clattered in the next room, followed by a mechanical voice declaring, "The bread has achieved an aggressive texture," and she decided the afterlife was probably better organized. Her eyes opened slowly. She lay beneath thick wool blankets on a narrow bed beside an iron stove. Copper pipes ran along the ceiling, carrying heat through the old house, while tiny repair drones hovered near a cracked window, sealing the edges against the storm. Nothing restrained her wrists. No armed guard stood by the door. Her damaged translator bracelet rested on a table, opened carefully beside a row of human tools. Panic arrived anyway. She pushed herself upright too quickly, and the room tilted. A sharp ache passed through her stomach, reminding her that fear was not the only thing trying to kill her. Elias appeared in the doorway carrying a wooden tray. He stopped when he saw her awake. "Good," he said. "I was beginning to worry my cooking had frightened you into a coma." The tray held a bowl of steaming soup, thick slices of bread, roasted vegetables, preserved berries, and a small cup of golden liquid. The smell struck her with such force that tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. Her people considered public crying undignified, especially among noble families. But noble rules had never accounted for 6 days of starvation and warm bread. Elias placed the tray on the table beside her. "Easy," he said. "Eat slowly." She stared at him, then at the food. "Why?" Her translator produced the word in a cracked metallic tone. "Why what?" "Why give this to me?" "Because you asked for food and then collapsed in my mud." He pulled a chair closer. "Also, leaving you outside would have made the gate feel guilty, and it already has emotional problems." From the hallway, the security sensor called, "I heard that." The girl flinched. Elias raised one hand. "That is just the house system. It enjoys dramatic timing." She watched him carefully. "No questions?" "Later." "No payment?" "You can pay me by not dying. Paperwork for dead visitors is terrible." Her long ears shifted slightly, an unconscious gesture of uncertainty. She lifted the spoon, but her fingers trembled so badly that broth spilled onto the blanket. Shame burned through her. Elias looked away at once, pretending to inspect the stove. "The spoon is defective," he said. "We have had complaints." The cooking unit rolled in from the kitchen. "There have been no complaints." "There is one now. Your complaint lacks technical merit." The girl made a sound she did not recognize at first. It was small and rough from disuse, but it was laughter. Elias glanced back, and some of the tension left his face. She tried again, this time bringing the spoon to her lips. The soup was simple: root vegetables, herbs, grain, and something smoky, but the first mouthful seemed to spread through every cold part of her body. She closed her eyes. Memories rose without permission. Palace dining halls, silver tables, her mother correcting her posture, her younger cousin stealing desserts beneath the table. Then came fire, alarms, and the shudder of the royal evacuation ship splitting apart over a burning moon. Her hand tightened around the spoon. Elias noticed, but said nothing. She ate slowly at first, then faster, until he gently moved the bread beyond her reach. "You will hurt yourself." Her silver eyes flashed. "Give it back." That sounded healthy. Human. Alien. She blinked at him. "Is that an insult?" "Only if you say it with confidence." He returned half a slice. She ate it with fierce concentration, then pointed toward the cup. "What is that?" "Honey and warm water." "Medicine?" "Technically, no. Emotionally, yes." The cooking unit rotated its lens toward her. "He uses honey to solve problems he does not understand." "It has an excellent success rate," Elias said. As she drank, the blue lines beneath her skin brightened faintly. Elias watched with open curiosity but avoided staring. "What should I call you?" he asked. The answer rose automatically to her lips: Princess Seraline Vielle of the Lumen Crown, but the title felt like a beacon that could summon every enemy in the sector. "Sera," she said after a pause. "Sera," Elias repeated. "I am Elias. The rude machine is Bix." "I am not rude," Bix said. "I am accurate without decorative softness." Sera looked toward the window. Beyond the glass, rain hammered the darkness. A pale flash moved high in the clouds, too controlled to be lightning. Her ears stiffened. "Someone is searching." Elias followed her gaze. "For you?" She lowered the cup. "I do not know." It was the first lie she told him, and it tasted more bitter than hunger. Far above the house, the black drone transmitted her recovering life signs across the storm. On the edge of the system, a royal warship received the signal. At the same moment, a second vessel hidden behind the moon intercepted it as well. Two fleets changed course toward the human settlement, each believing it had found the missing girl first. By morning, the storm had weakened into a gray mist that clung to the valley and softened the mountains into distant shadows. Sera woke to the sound of metal striking metal outside, followed by Elias muttering something about machines developing personal grudges. She found him beside an ancient agricultural crawler, half buried in the mud, its 6 wheels motionless, and its engine compartment open like the chest of a mechanical beast. Bix hovered nearby on a magnetic service platform, offering advice with the confidence of someone who had never successfully repaired anything. "The fuel regulator has failed," Bix announced. "The fuel regulator was replaced last month," Elias replied. "Then it has failed with impressive efficiency." Sera stood beneath the doorway wrapped in one of Elias's coats. It reached nearly to her ankles, and the sleeves swallowed her hands. Her strength had begun to return, though each step still reminded her how close she had come to dying beside the gate. Elias looked up. "You should be resting." "I have rested enough." "You slept 9 hours. Among my people, that is considered excessive. Among mine, it is considered Tuesday." She approached the crawler and studied the exposed machinery. Human technology seemed primitive compared with the crystalline systems of her homeworld, yet there was an appealing stubbornness in its design. Every component looked as though it had been built to survive impact, weather, neglect, and several generations of bad decisions. She touched the cracked regulator housing. A faint blue glow passed from the lines beneath her skin into her fingertips. "This is not broken," she said. "It is receiving conflicting commands." Elias raised an eyebrow. "The machine is confused." "Yes." "Good. It belongs here." Sera removed the damaged translator bracelet from her wrist and opened its casing. Inside, a thread of silver circuitry shimmered like liquid light. She pulled free a narrow filament and connected it to the crawler's control port. Symbols spread across the vehicle's dashboard, transforming from human code into flowing lumen script. Elias watched closely. "Is that safe?" "Probably. That word has buried many engineers." The crawler suddenly roared to life. One wheel spun backward, two lifted from the ground, and the machine turned in a tight circle before crashing gently into a stack of empty crates. Bix emitted a pleased chime. "Repair successful." "It attacked the crates," Elias said. "The crates were obstructing agricultural progress." Sera covered her mouth, but laughter escaped anyway. It felt unfamiliar and almost painful, like stretching a muscle she had forgotten existed. Together, they spent the afternoon correcting the crawler's navigation system. Elias taught her the names of human tools, though several names appeared to be invented. Sera doubted the persuasive hammer was an official technical term, and she was nearly certain no legitimate device was called that cursed little clamp. In return, she showed him how to stabilize damaged circuits by passing a controlled bioelectric pulse through them. Elias tried once, received a mild shock, and decided human biology had not been designed for elegance. As they worked, Sera spoke cautiously about the war. She told him of cities darkened by orbital weapons, refugee ships vanishing between jump gates, and soldiers wearing no recognized insignia. She did not mention the palace, the royal guard, or the last moment she had seen her mother standing beneath emergency lights while ordering the evacuation fleet to launch without her. Elias listened without interruption. When she finished, he tightened a bolt and said, "You do not have to tell me the parts that hurt most." Sera looked at him. "Why not?" "Because they will still be there tomorrow." The answer unsettled her more than suspicion would have. Kindness had always been ceremonial in the royal court, exchanged beneath banners and witnessed by officials. Elias offered it quietly, without expectation, as if compassion were as ordinary as repairing a wheel. Near sunset, the crawler finally moved across the field in a straight line. It lasted 11 seconds before turning toward the chicken enclosure. Elias sprinted after it. Sera followed, laughing as Bix shouted evacuation instructions to birds that ignored him completely. They stopped the machine before disaster, though one offended chicken climbed onto Elias's shoulder and refused to leave. "You appear to have been promoted," Sera said. "To what?" "Royal transport." The humor faded when her bracelet emitted a sharp pulse. A hidden signal flashed across its cracked display, written in a code only members of the Lumen royal family could read. "Princess Seraline, remain hidden. The Queen lives." Sera's breath caught. Before she could process the message, a second line appeared beneath it from an unknown source. "We know where you are." The blue markings beneath her skin dimmed. Across the valley, 3 figures in merchant cloaks stepped from a silent gravitic vehicle and began walking toward the settlement. The 3 visitors arrived just before nightfall, when the valley lamps began glowing along the muddy road and the last mist gathered in pale ribbons above the fields. They claimed to be agricultural merchants from the eastern colonies, but Elias distrusted them before they reached his gate. Real merchants complained about fuel prices, weather, taxes, and customers. These 3 complained about nothing. They walked in perfect formation beneath dark traveling cloaks, their boots untouched by mud, while a silver gravitic vehicle waited soundlessly among the trees behind them. Sera watched from the kitchen window, her long ears angled forward with fear. "They are not traitors," she whispered. Elias set down the plate he was drying. "I know. How? One of them looked at my tractor without trying to sell me a replacement. Bix rotated his lens toward the visitors displayed on the wall monitor. Their clothing contains concealed energy signatures. Weapons? Sera asked. Or extremely aggressive tailoring? Elias told her to remain inside, then stepped onto the porch with the easy posture of a man greeting neighbors rather than armed strangers. The tallest visitor lowered his hood. His face was almost human, though the skin around his eyes shimmered faintly with synthetic camouflage. "We are searching for a damaged transport," he said. "It may have crossed this valley." "Lots of damaged things cross my property," Elias replied. "Most of them belong to me." The visitor's gaze moved past him toward the house. "Have you seen anyone unusual?" Elias glanced back at Bix, who had rolled into the doorway wearing a cooking pot like a helmet. "Define unusual." The second stranger produced a thin hollow card bearing the seal of the Interstellar Relief Authority. The seal looked convincing, but Sera recognized the tiny flaw in its central star. The outer points curved inward, an old counterfeit mark used by intelligence groups during the war. She touched the communication panel and quietly sent Elias a single word through his wrist terminal. "False." He read it without changing expression. "You should try the settlement center," he said. "People there enjoy questions, especially Mayor Doran. Ask him about drainage systems and he will keep you until winter." The tallest stranger smiled without warmth. "We prefer to complete our search here." Behind Elias, the house lights flickered. One visitor had activated a scanner beneath his cloak. Blue energy swept through the walls, probing for biological signatures. Sera felt it pass across her chest. Her bracelet vibrated violently, and the luminous lines beneath her skin flared in response. The scanner chirped. The strangers heard it. So did Elias. "That," Bix announced from the doorway, "was not the oven." The visitors moved at once. The third drew a compact pulse weapon, but Elias kicked the porch's emergency lever. An old mining shield erupted from the roof with a deafening hum, forming a transparent barrier between them. The pulse struck it and burst into a web of white light. Elias stumbled backward. "I installed that for hail," he said. "The hail around here is heavily armed." Sera ran from the kitchen despite his warning. She pressed her damaged bracelet against the house control panel, feeding alien code into the primitive defense system. Every machine on the property woke simultaneously. Repair drones shot from the workshop. The agricultural crawler roared across the yard. Automated sprinklers rose from the ground and blasted the visitors with freezing water. For several seconds, the battle resembled less an assassination attempt and more a disastrous festival. One attacker slipped in the mud and fired into a fruit tree. Another was chased in circles by the crawler, which had apparently retained its hostility toward anything wearing a cloak. Bix rolled onto the porch and projected a warning hologram 10 meters tall. "Leave the property," his enormous red message declared. Beneath it, in smaller letters, appeared, "Cooking service temporarily unavailable." The tallest stranger disabled the mining shield with a black disc and lunged towards Sera. Elias intercepted him, driving a shoulder into his chest. They crashed against the railing. The synthetic camouflage around the stranger's face failed, revealing dark metallic implants spreading from his jaw to his temple. "The princess belongs to the directorate," he hissed. Elias froze for half a heartbeat. Sera did too. Her secret had been spoken aloud. Then Elias struck the man with the heavy flashlight clipped to his belt. "She belongs to herself," he said. The attacker fell from the porch into the mud. A distant thunder rolled across the sky, too steady and deep to be weather. The strangers looked upward. Through the clouds, immense shapes emerged, warships with golden hulls, their engines turning the night bright as dawn. The counterfeit merchants abandoned their attack and fled toward their vehicle, but the gravitic craft never lifted. A narrow beam descended from the clouds and locked it to the ground. Sera stepped into the yard, trembling as the largest ship opened a channel across every speaker in the valley. A woman's voice filled the air, controlled yet breaking beneath the weight of hope. "This is Queen Maerava of the Lumen Crown. By royal authority, no vessel is to leave this region." Sera's knees weakened. Elias caught her before she fell. High above them, dozens of golden ships took position around the settlement, while far beyond the mountains, hidden in darkness, another fleet watched and prepared to strike. The Golden Fleet did not descend immediately. It remained suspended above the valley in perfect silence, dozens of enormous ships holding position between the clouds like pieces of a second sky. Their hulls reflected the settlement lights in long rivers of gold, while smaller escort craft spread outward and sealed every road, field, and mountain pass. No one in the village slept. Curtains moved in every window, doors opened cautiously, and Mayor Doran stood in the center of the road wearing one boot, a ceremonial coat, and the expression of a man who had prepared his entire life for a drainage dispute, but not an interstellar royal arrival. Elias kept one arm around Sera as she stared upward. Her face had gone pale, though the blue lines beneath her skin glowed brighter than they had since he found her. "Your queen sounds serious," he said softly. "She is my mother." Elias looked at her. For a moment, even he had no joke ready. Bix solved the problem by rolling into the yard and announcing, "Royal ancestry detected. Recalculating appropriate table manners." Sera closed her eyes. "Please do not." "Too late. I have deleted 7 insulting soup protocols." A column of white light descended near the settlement square. Within it appeared a formation of armored figures, tall and elegant, their helmets shaped around long ears, and their weapons folded against their backs. At their center stood a woman in silver-gold armor, her pale hair braided beneath a narrow crown of luminous crystal. She looked remarkably like Sera, though grief and command had sharpened every line of her face. Queen Maerava took one step forward and stopped. Across the muddy road, mother and daughter stared at each other, as if the distance between them were greater than the entire galaxy. Sera moved first. She ran. The queen abandoned every trace of royal dignity and met her halfway, dropping to her knees in the mud as she wrapped both arms around her daughter. Neither spoke. The royal guards turned their faces away with disciplined politeness. Mayor Doran began crying openly, then claimed the wind had entered both eyes at once. Elias stood near the porch, suddenly feeling like an intruder in his own yard. Bix projected a small sign reading, "Reunion in progress. Please avoid loud appliances." The moment did not last. A sharp alarm swept across the fleet overhead. Golden ships shifted formation as red symbols appeared across their hulls. One of the Queen's officers raised a hand to his helmet. "Majesty, hostile vessels emerging beyond the western ridge. Directorate configuration." The hidden fleet rose from behind the mountains like black blades. Their engines burned violet through the clouds, and dozens of attack craft accelerated toward the settlement. The Queen stood, placing herself between Sera and the sky. "Return the princess to the flagship." Sera pulled away. "No, this is not a request." "Then it is poorly timed." Elias almost smiled. The family resemblance had become obvious. The first Directorate fighters crossed the valley seconds later. Golden interceptors met them above the fields, and the night erupted in silent flashes as defensive shields absorbed plasma fire. One damaged craft spun low over the settlement, scattering roof tiles before crashing into an empty grain depot. The explosion shook Elias's house. "That depot was recently repaired," Mayor Doran shouted in outrage, as though war required municipal permission. Royal guards surrounded Sera, but a squad of black-armored soldiers materialized behind the workshop using short-range teleportation. Their arrival distorted the air and froze the grass beneath their boots. Elias grabbed Sera's wrist and pulled her toward the barn. "There is an underground service tunnel." "You built an escape tunnel?" she asked as they ran. "I built a drainage channel. It became an escape tunnel when people started shooting. Bix followed at maximum speed, which was slightly faster than a determined chair. The Queen and her guards opened fire behind them, bright arcs of energy tearing through the darkness. Inside the barn, Elias shoved aside a stack of feed containers and opened a rusted hatch. Sera hesitated. "What about my mother? She arrived with 40 warships. I think she can manage for a minute." They climbed down as the barn doors exploded inward. The tunnel smelled of wet soil and machine oil. Elias activated emergency lamps, revealing old maintenance rails that ran beneath the fields toward the river. A small cargo cart waited on them. Bix rolled aboard first. "I claim navigation authority." "You once drove into a wall," Elias said. "The wall lacked proper markings." Sera climbed beside him, and Elias released the brake. The cart shot forward with a violent jerk. Above them, weapons fire shook dirt from the ceiling. Halfway through the tunnel, Sera's bracelet flashed again. A directorate signal had locked onto her position. "They can track me," she said. Elias looked at the bracelet, then at the cart's power cell. "Can you make it lie?" Her fear shifted into concentration. She opened the damaged casing and connected its silver filament to the cart's transmitter. Within seconds, 6 false life signs appeared across the valley, each moving in a different direction. Directorate squads scattered after them. One signal entered the chicken enclosure. Another raced toward Mayor Doran's sewage station. "That one is cruel," Elias said. "They threatened my mother." "Fair." The cart burst from the tunnel near the river just as a royal shuttle descended through the trees. Queen Maerava stepped out before it fully landed, her armor scarred and smoking. She looked at Elias, then at her daughter, then at Bix, who still wore the cooking pot as a helmet. "This is the human who saved you?" she asked. Sera nodded. The Queen studied him with the cold intensity of someone accustomed to commanding planets. "You protected the heir of the Lumen Crown." Elias glanced toward the burning sky. "Mostly I fed her." Behind them, another wave of black ships broke through the clouds, and the Queen's expression hardened. "Then, human, tonight you may have to do both." The royal shuttle rose from the riverbank under a storm of falling sparks, its shields bending the night around it in waves of gold. Elias sat strapped into a narrow seat beside Sera while Bix occupied the central aisle, because none of the restraints had been designed for a cooking machine with strong opinions. Queen Maerava stood near the cockpit, one hand gripping an overhead rail as the shuttle climbed between burning fragments of fighter craft. Every few seconds, the hull rang with another impact. "Is this normal royal transportation?" Elias asked. Sera tightened her harness. "No." Bix's lens brightened. "Statistically, that answer is not comforting." The shuttle banked sharply, throwing him into a guard's armored boots. "Navigation complaint registered," he announced from the floor. Above them, the Queen's flagship filled the sky, a vast crescent of luminous metal surrounded by defensive drones. Its docking bay opened just long enough for the shuttle to enter, before a directorate missile struck the outer shield. Golden energy rippled across the ship like sunlight over water. The interior of the flagship was more palace than war vessel. Crystal panels floated above polished floors, displaying battles across the valley, while officers in silver armor moved between holographic command stations. The moment Sera stepped onto the bridge, every conversation stopped. Some officers bowed. Others stared as though they were seeing a ghost returned from legend. Maerava ignored ceremony. "Seal the princess's signature from all external scans," she ordered. "Redirect power from the ceremonial decks." A nervous officer hesitated. "Majesty, that will disable the Hall of Ancestral Radiance." "The ancestors will survive the darkness." Elias leaned toward Sera. "I like her. She can hear you. Then I admire her at a respectful volume." The Queen's eyes briefly moved toward him, and for the first time something almost resembling amusement touched her face. It vanished when the tactical display changed. The Directorate fleet had formed a ring around the flagship. At its center appeared a black carrier whose surface absorbed nearly every trace of light. A transmission opened without permission. A man's face emerged above the command deck, thin and severe, with mechanical implants surrounding one eye. "Return the heir," he said. "The Directorate will spare this settlement." Maerava stepped forward. "You bombed 3 refugee worlds searching for her. Necessary pressure. Then you have mistaken cruelty for strategy." The transmission shifted toward Sera. "Princess Sera Line, your blood can activate the Crown Gate. Your mother has hidden its power for generations. Come willingly, and no more civilians need die." Elias looked at Sera. She had never mentioned any gate, but the fear in her silver eyes confirmed every word. The Crown Gate was an ancient jump structure buried beyond the edge of known space, capable of opening routes through regions no modern vessel could cross. In the wrong hands, armies could appear inside any defended system. The Directorate had not hunted a missing girl. It had hunted a key. Sera lifted her chin. "I will never open it for you." The man smiled. "You already have." Red warnings flooded the bridge. Her bracelet, damaged and repeatedly scanned, had transmitted fragments of her royal genetic code. The black carrier began assembling them into an artificial access sequence. "Time until gate activation?" Maerava demanded. 9 minutes, an officer replied. Elias studied the tactical display. The symbols meant little to him, but the pattern did not. The enemy carrier was drawing energy from every surrounding ship, leaving their outer formation weak. "They are putting all their power into one machine," he said. "Can your fleet hit it?" "Not through the carrier shield," Maerava answered. Bix rolled beside a holographic console. "The shield cycles every 4 seconds to release excess thermal charge." An officer stared at him. "How did that appliance access tactical systems?" "Poor password discipline," Bix said. "Also, I am not an appliance during emergencies." Elias pointed to the thermal vents marked across the carrier's lower hull. "Your weapons cannot pass through the shield, but something small might pass during the cycle." The Queen understood immediately. "A maintenance craft." "Or an agricultural crawler," Sera said. Everyone looked at her. Elias slowly smiled. The crawler's control system still contained alien code from her bracelet. Its reactor was primitive, heavily shielded, and almost invisible to military sensors. More importantly, the royal shuttle had carried it aboard after the settlement evacuation, because Mayor Doran had loudly insisted it was municipal property. 10 minutes later, the crawler launched from the flagship inside a cargo shell, carrying Elias, Sera, Bix, and enough improvised explosives to make every safety inspector in the sector faint. "This is the worst repair job I have ever accepted," Elias said as the shell shook around them. "You are not repairing the carrier," Sera replied. "That explains the explosives." They struck the enemy hull during the shield's 4-second opening. Magnetic clamps locked the crawler to the metal surface. Directorate fighters swept past without noticing the small farming machine crawling toward the thermal vents. Bix guided them through a service opening while complaining that hostile warships lacked accessible kitchen facilities. Deep inside the carrier, Sera connected her bracelet to the gate engine. Instead of stopping the activation, she changed its destination. The Crown Gate opened for 1 brilliant second, not into a conquered system, but into the empty gravity well of a dead star. The carrier's stolen energy vanished into the void. Every Directorate ship lost power at once. Across the bridge, darkness swallowed the mechanical face of their commander. The royal fleet surrounded them before their systems could recover. When Elias, Sera, and Bix returned to the flagship, Maerava waited in the docking bay. She crossed the distance without guards or ceremony and embraced her daughter again. Then she faced Elias. "You entered an enemy warship with a farm machine." Elias removed his scorched coat. "It was recently repaired." Bix rolled forward. "Repair quality remains disputed." For the first time, the Queen laughed, quiet and exhausted, while outside the captured Directorate fleet drifted harmlessly beneath the stars. 3 weeks after the battle, the valley no longer looked forgotten. Golden relief ships hovered above the fields, unloading medical supplies, construction drones, and enough diplomats to make Mayor Doran regret ever complaining that nothing important happened there. The damaged grain depot had been rebuilt twice the size. The eastern road had been resurfaced with self-repairing alloy, and Elias's house had acquired a royal communication tower that Bix insisted ruined the roof's humble mechanical dignity. Refugees arrived each morning aboard quiet transports, families from shattered moons, wounded soldiers who had abandoned the directorate, children carrying everything they owned in transparent bags. None were searched at gunpoint. None were asked to prove they deserved food. At Sera's request, the first building completed beside the settlement square was a public kitchen. Above its entrance, a new sign read, "No one leaves hungry." Beneath it, Elias had added in smaller letters, "Complaints about the soup may be directed to Bix." Bix had immediately painted another line below that. "False accusations will be recorded." The directorate commanders were awaiting trial before a coalition tribunal. Their captured records exposed secret attacks on refugee worlds, false distress signals, and the conspiracy to seize Sera's genetic access to the Crown Gate. With their supply network revealed, most of their remaining forces surrendered. Queen Maerava ordered the ancient gate sealed, not destroyed, placing its control under representatives from 12 civilizations instead of the royal family alone. "No bloodline should hold a road large enough for an army," she declared before the Galactic Assembly. Sera stood beside her during the speech, wearing simple silver robes rather than ceremonial armor. For the first time in her life, she did not feel like a key, an heir, or a symbol. She felt like someone who had survived long enough to choose what came next. Her choice surprised the court. She refused to return permanently to the capital. Instead, she became the Crown's envoy for displaced worlds and established a network of protected refuge stations along abandoned trade routes. The first station was built in Elias's valley. The second opened above the moon where her evacuation ship had broken apart. Every station carried the same promise and the same kitchen sign, though Bix repeatedly demanded licensing fees for what he called the unauthorized expansion of his culinary reputation. On the evening before the Queen's departure, Maerava joined Elias and Sera at the small wooden table where the first feast had been served. Royal guards waited outside, pretending not to watch the chickens chase a repair drone around the yard. The Queen placed a narrow black case before Elias. Inside rested a golden insignia, a land charter, and a crystal account seal containing more wealth than he could have spent in several lifetimes. "The Lumen Crown owes you a debt," she said. Elias closed the case. "Then feed the next person who falls at your gate." Maerava studied him in silence. Months earlier, Sera would have feared that silence. Now she recognized it as her mother's way of hiding emotion from witnesses. "That is all you ask?" "I could also use a new roof." Bix rolled past carrying a tray. "Denied. The current roof supports my antenna." The Queen laughed. This time she did not try to stop herself. She removed the golden insignia from the case and pinned it to the wall beside the old repair sign. "Then let it mean this house is protected by the Crown, though I suspect the Crown may require protection from this house." Dinner lasted late into the night. Sera ate slowly, not because she feared the food would disappear, but because she wanted the moment to remain. She told Elias that she still dreamed of the road, the cold, and the scanner sweeping through her bones. Yet the dream always changed now. A light appeared ahead. A rude gate asked for her business. Warmth waited beyond it. When the royal shuttle finally arrived, Sera stood beside Elias beneath the stars. "I lied to you when you asked who I was," she said. "You were frightened. I was also a princess." "That sounds exhausting." "It is." She smiled, then handed him her repaired translator bracelet. Its cracked casing had been preserved, but the silver circuitry inside now glowed steadily. "Keep it, so I cannot pretend I lost your frequency." Elias accepted it. "You could visit without bringing a fleet." "I will speak to my mother, but she enjoys entrances." Maerava called from the shuttle. "I can still hear you." Sera hugged Elias tightly. Her long ears trembled, but she did not cry until she turned away. The shuttle lifted, joining the golden ships above the valley. They departed one by one, leaving the night quiet again. Months later, another storm swept across the mountains. Elias was repairing the kitchen window when the gate alarm chimed. Outside stood a frightened family from an unknown species, soaked, exhausted, and staring at the house as though uncertain whether mercy could be real. The censor rotated toward them. "State your business." The smallest child whispered, "Food." Before the machine could object, Elias opened the door. Behind him, Bix was already heating the soup. "Come inside," Elias said. "You have found the right place."